Hey friends, it's Alex from Vulture Culture, and today I'm going to cover what I think is the right synth for you to purchase in 2022. The synth market has exploded with a lot of really cool new products in the last just couple of years, so I thought it was time for me to do an update video. Because there's no such thing as the perfect synthesizer at the perfect price, I've divided this video up into chapters based off of your needs, what you're looking for out of a synth. And before we begin, a quick note about value. So sometimes people don't like that I always talk about price in relationship to synthesizers because they just care about what the synth sounds like and they don't really care. We live in the real world where people have to make real trade-offs with their money that they went out and worked really hard for. So I always care about giving you information that isn't just, is this a great sounding synth? Well, guess what? A lot of them really do sound great. But is it a good synth? Is it a good synth value for you to spend your hard-earned money on? That's what I care about. That's what I focus this channel on. If value doesn't matter, we should all just buy Moog ones and stop talking about which synths are worth buying. The first category I want to focus on is the best gift for a beginner. So this category is for if you have a daughter or a son, niece or nephew, estranged uncle who's getting into making electronic music, basically a beginner who wants to get a hardware synth. What would be the best synth that I would recommend for that? The winner of the best synthesizer that would be a great gift for a beginner is the Typhon Desktop Monophonic Analog Synthesizer by the great Dreadbox. So what makes this synthesizer special is obviously the styling is great. It's got the incredible Dreadbox oscillators and it's got effects built in by Sine Vibes, which makes a lot of really great plugins for actually the Chord Prologue, which you guys know I'm a huge fan of. It's basically the perfect complementary synth to software, which if you're a beginner, you're probably using something like Serum or Omnisphere. And so if you want to get into the hardware world and you want to get into the analog world, I can't think of a product that's a lot better than this. At the price point, it's pretty much unbeatable in terms of being a really incredible, versatile analog monosynth with digital effects. It's just really a knock it out of the park tour de force as far as an analog monosynth goes. The runner-up would be the Behringer Model D, which is a clone of the Mini Moog from the 70s, but it's got some semi-modular stuff going on. It's cheaper than the Typhon, not by a lot though, and for me the Typhon's really where it's at because it's got the effects and everything and a simpler layout and just a really great sound. But this is also a great intro synth for somebody who's trying to get into analog hardware synthesis, breaking out of the box and starting the journey into the analog hardware world. If there's a trend in the 2022 hardware market, it is to go back in time to those vintage synth tones that we all know and love and get nostalgic for. So the winner of the best value vintage recreation is the Behringer TD3 analog bassline synthesizer. This is an incredible price point for an analog monosynth that recreates that classic Roland 303 sound. The price point on the TD3BB analog synthesizer is insane. So right now on Reverb, the cheapest Roland 303 I can find is $28.99, which makes the Behringer cost 4% of the original if you wanted to buy a real 303. That has got to be the best value recreation maybe of all time. And what's great about this synth is it really sounds great. I've heard this thing in a lot of shootouts and it's really impressive. So for me, this is kind of a no-brainer if you like that acid sound, that classic 303 sound. This gives you everything you want, and it's actually a little more functional too at an insane price point, all analog. Just incredible that Behringer's able to do this. The runner-up is the Roland JD08 Boutique synth. So the boutiques get a little bit of hate, and I think it's well-deserved because of their limited voice count, and also their analog recreations are not the best on the market. However, the digital recreations are very good, which makes sense because a digital synth, in theory, should be reproducible in software. And the JD08 has extended polyphony and allows you to really get all of those classic JD800 sounds that we all know and love. To compare here, you can see that this is a $400 synth compared to the cheapest JD800 I can find right now is $2,000, so that's 20% of the price. Still a really great value when we're talking about trying to capture some of those nostalgic tones of the era that maybe you grew up in. Next up, we have my favorite category. What is the best value analog polysynth that you can buy right now? And the winner is the Minilog XD by Korg. So I think this is still the reigning champion, really cool analog poly at the price point. So $629, or you can spend $729 and get the version with keys. I would recommend getting the module and then pairing it with something like a 49 key keyboard controller. I would rather spend the money to get 49 full-size keys than 37 small keys. But I think this is the most incredible synth that you can get, because $600 is a lot of money, but you have the incredible Korg sound, and it's basically a scaled down version of the Korg Prologue, their flagship analog, but it's got additional features like a motion sequencer where you can program in modulation of any of the knobs into the sequencer itself. The effects are incredible. It comes with a big sky reverb sound, that is the where the reverb goes up in octaves as it feeds back through. It's voltage controlled oscillators as compared to digitally controlled oscillators, so it's going to have that alive moving sound. You don't have to fake it with a vintage or slop knob. It's just the sound of the VCOs. I think the Korg analog sound is incredible, and that this is almost everything you could want from an analog synthesizer. The 4 voices are a little bit of a bummer though, so let's compare it to the runner-up in this category, which to me would be the Dreadbox Nymfes 6-voice analog synthesizer. So Nymfes is 6 voices, which really is great. 4 voices on the Minilog XD is the only thing that's a little bit of a bummer. You can make that work, but I like not having to worry about it as much. Some features of the Nymfes that really stand out are those incredible Dreadbox oscillators that are voltage controlled, 6 of them with a sub. It's got polyphonic LFOs, so what that means is, like, as you play keys, the LFOs trigger individually instead of all together, and those can be key tracked so that they play at different rates. Really cool. I think the reason this is the runner-up and not the winner, even though it's cheaper, is the effect section. The reverb is mono, and it has a certain sort of Greek sound that might remind you of certain soundtracks, but I don't think it's as versatile or as useful. You don't have a built-in chorus, a lot of that stuff. So if you want to have fully produced sounds, you probably need more than just this. And it has a certain tone to it that is that vintage sort of Vangelis sound, but I don't know if it's as versatile. The XD really covers all of the bases. You could have bass, you could have pads, leads, FM, or analog FM, I mean to say. You can load in all of those user oscillators, so you can do wavetable synthesis, physical modeling, all sorts of stuff. It's just a knock it out of the park, no brainer. If you want an analog poly synth, I think this is still the best value on the market, and no one has dethroned Korg yet at this price point. All right, so moving on, let's talk about the best value digital synth on the market right now. The winner is the Wavestate, also by Korg. So I might sound like I'm a Korg shill, and maybe I am, but I think the Wavestate offers some of the most interesting, complex synthesis at the price point. It's really mind-blowing, and Wavestate just got upgraded to 2.0, which includes an editor, which allows you to do some really deep synthesis on your desktop with the Wavestate. And I love the original Wavestation. You can see it over there, and it is just a sound that I think is underused, the way that you can change through different samples over time and vary the pitch, length, arpeggiation, all sorts of interesting, complex stuff. And with Wavestate, we also get the ability to do things like add filters that the original Wavestation didn't have, so you can do all the dubsteppy stuff too. And the runner-up in this category is also Korg, and that's the OP6. So I think the FM synthesizer has always challenged synthesis because FM's a little unintuitive. I think the OP6 really makes FM synthesis easier to understand because of those sliders over there that control the different operators, and the knobs control the ratios, and they're color coded so you can see if they're modulating or not. And with that architecture, along with their virtual analog, really great filters like from the Poly 6, I think this makes FM synthesis finally more accessible to someone who's not willing to sit there in a dungeon and read charts. Next up, we have the best-in-class analog poly synth. So what I mean by best-in-class is just the overall most impressive new product on the market, and I have a feeling you already know what it is. So the best-in-class analog poly winner is the sequential take 5. No surprises here. $1,500 for a 5-voice VCO sequential synth is an incredible price point. $150 less than the sequential Rev 2, which was already probably the market killer. And I think this is just mind-blowing that we have this synthesizer that has all of that famous Dave Smith sound, but at a price point that a lot of people can afford. And this thing sounds great. Jamie from Geosynth said it's the best sounding sequential synth, which is saying a lot because it's less than half the cost of a Prophet 6. It's just a market killing machine. I think that they're going to sell so many of these, and honestly, if there was one analog polysynth to buy, it's gotta be this one. It's the perfect sort of blend of price point, but giving you everything you want. Of course, we'd all like an extra voice or so, but I don't think that's a big deal at the end of the day. I would have loved to see that multi-mode filter from the Pro 3 on this. I think a lot of us thought that's what we were getting when we saw the knob color layout. But really overall, I think this is an unbeatable synth. And if there was one synth I would recommend buying, if you were to buy just one hardware synth, it would be this one. All right, so next up, we have the best in class for digital or hybrid synths. And the winner of this category is the Hydra Synth Deluxe. So this synthesizer is insane. And the reason we're going with this is because it's actually at a great price point. $1,800 for 73 keys of polyphonic aftertouch. You can't get that anywhere else. So for those of you guys who don't know, polyphonic aftertouch is where you have aftertouch, which is pressure after you've pressed the key, but on every key individually, which can be routed to all sorts of modulation destinations. It's inspired by the Yamaha CS80. It has the touch strip of the Yamaha CS80 and probably the most incredible sounding digital wavetable synthesis on the market right now. It really feels like a high quality machine at an incredible price point. And the only other synth that I think comes close to this would be the Novation Summit 61 key hybrid synth, but I don't think the new Oxford oscillators sound as good as the Hydra synth, and also it's $400 more for a 61 key versus 73 without poly aftertouch. And you do get those great analog filters, which is worth something. But at the end of the day, I don't think that gives you enough reason to spend that extra money when you have so much more versatility. If you're going to be doing wavetable synthesis, at the end of the day, it's not about having juicy analog filters anyways. And I think that this synthesizer is just a market killer in its category. So bravo to ASM. You guys knocked it out of the park. This is a synthesizer that I have been lusting after for a long time. And when they came out with the 73 key version, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Next up, we have the best semi-modular analog synth, and the winner of this category is the 2600 by Behringer. Really, I should pronounce it Behringer, but whatever, everybody says Behringer. It's a recreation of the ARP 2600, and it's just an incredible sounding, looking, and versatile semi-modular synth. Really, the only synth in that I think would be more compelling than this would be the Moog Matriarch, but it's cost like 3 times as much. And, you know, you get that incredible Moog sound. I do think this is one of their most compelling products, if not the most compelling one, but the price point and the quality on this is incredible. And so I have no reservations about recommending this if you want to get into the semi-modular world, or you want to integrate a little bit of Eurorack action into your setup. Something like this would fit in perfectly. And finally, in the hardware category at least, let's talk about my overall dream synth. So this would be the category of if you don't really care about money as much and you just want the best sounding analog synth you can get your hands on, what would that be? And the winner is, of course, the OB6. So the sequential Oberheim OB6 just has that incredible Oberheim sound with the capacity to do all of those incredible state variable filter sounds like notch pads and stuff like that. This to me really is the standout sequential synth. If you could have any analog poly, what would you get? It's probably this. It's just a sound that isn't capturable by any other company and is the height of quality. While while still being relatively simple to program. The runner-up in this category would be the Arturia Polybrute, which is a little bit cheaper, definitely more interesting modulation possibilities here, and potentially the better synthesizer overall. Comes with 2 layers of filters, and the standout feature on this synth is that it has a morph knob, so every preset can be set to have a state A, state B, and as you move that knob, every single knob morphs to the other position, which is pretty mind-bending when it comes to when you think about what's possible with this synthesizer. Really incredible. So either of these 2 synths would be wonderful dream synths if you're not that concerned. And honestly, 2700 is not that much more than a Take 5. It's kind of a Take 5 plus a wave state. At the end of the day, if you're really interested in getting a great analog synth, I think either of these 2 would be really great choices. I was not going to say the Moog 1, god damn it, because $9,000, even if it's the best analog synth ever, is just not worth it. Okay, to wrap up, let's talk software synths real quick. So first off, we have the best value software synthesizer on the market, and you probably won't be surprised to find that it is Serum by X4 Records. So I want to compare a little bit more with some of the other synths that are in the price point here. Serum is the highest quality wavetable synth on the market, to my knowledge. And importantly, it's also very widely used, which means that you will be able to find a lot of really great patches, as well as tutorial videos on YouTube on how to program it, which is actually worth a lot. And it's $189. Let's compare that real quick to UHE's Diva, which would probably be the best choice if you're into analog synths. This is the best analog modeling synth on the market. UHE makes the highest quality plugins when it comes to that. They just sound incredible. $10 cheaper, but as far as versatility goes, Serum is light years ahead of it, and you can still get pretty analog sounding stuff out of Serum. But if you're really going for, say, that OB6 sound, you might want to go with Diva. Or your synthwave person, that would be the way to go. The other synth that's in this category would be Pigments by Arturia. And this is sort of their version of Omnisphere, which would be your all-in-one solution synth. And I think this is pretty cool because it does have granular as well as analog modeling and samples. So you sort of get that sample plus synthesis sound that Omnisphere is so famous for. Kind of lets you get the best of both worlds, and maybe you want something that's an all-in-one synth, but you don't want to pay the $479 for Omnisphere. Well, this is half the price and really great. But at the end of the day, Serum is the standard in electronic dance music production for a reason. It is the greatest synth that will ever be made for wavetable synthesis until they come out with Serum 2. And finally, let's talk best-in-class, all-in-one, or really big synthesizers. The winner this year is the Native Instruments Complete 13. So again, I want to compare with some other stuff in the category, but Complete is got to be the best overall way you could spend $600 if you want to make electronic music or even orchestral music. It comes with an insane number of synths, and so Massive X, their new wavetable synth, could definitely fill the space of Serum. I don't think it's quite Serum, but I think it's a good synthesizer. But you also have FM8 for your FM synthesis. You've got Absinthe, which is one of my favorite synths of all time. You've got Spark, Prism, Monarch. It's got just, I mean, Monarch is an incredible sounding analog modeling synth. You've got Battery 4, which is the standard for drums in the industry. All of these Play series instruments, a bunch of acoustic pianos, drums and percussion, music from all over the world, vintage stuff, electric guitars, acoustic guitars, bass. You've got strings and horns for doing orchestral music, effects. You've got 24 contact expansions. Basically, this is the best all-in-one solution for if you want to get into electronic music and you only want to spend $600, this is it. This is pretty much everything you'll ever need. There's a more expansive Ultimate Producer version. I don't think that's worth it. It's basically everything Native Instruments has ever made. This is an incredible product, and it barely beats out my favorite synth of all time, Spectrasonics Omnisphere 2.8. Omnisphere, I think, is the greatest synthesizer of all time. You've got all of the power of Serum's wavetable synthesis. We can't currently import wavetables yet, so that's still waiting, but there's so many amazing wavetables in it, you probably wouldn't need to anyways. But Omnisphere really sets the standard when it comes to sound quality, innovation, versatility. They recently came out with 4 new products. They're sonic extensions. I did videos on those, you should check them out. But those are like instruments within an instrument, a lot like Monarch exists within Reactor in Native Instruments land. Omnisphere really is a platform. Their products like Keyscape and Trillion exist within Omnisphere, essentially. Spectrasonics, I believe, is, if you're willing to spend a little bit more money, it is the company worth buying products from, because Eric Persing helped design a lot of these vintage synthesizers in this room, like the Alpha Juno, the JX8P, the Roland D50, the JP8000, the JD800, just every sort of sound that has ever been a synth sound he's had his hands on, more or less. And it's just, I think, the greatest product out there. Let's compare it to the other way that you could spend $500-ish, which would be the Arturia V collection. Now, as far as vintage synth recreations go, I think Arturia does a pretty good job. If you go synth by synth, there's probably somebody who makes a better recreation of that synth that you're looking for. But the fact that you can get all of the instruments in their 28 different virtual classic keyboards and synths for $600, really great. I think the only thing is that comparing this $600 to everything you get from Complete 13 is a no-brainer. Complete 13 gives you a lot of really great synths, more than enough to keep you busy for years, but also everything else, effects, drums, samples, whereas the V collection is really only for if you're really that like retro person. And then in a way, you've got UHE Diva, which is going to give you the analog side better. There was a comparison a friend of mine did on comparing a real OB6 Serum, UHE Diva, and the OBXA and Arturia. And actually, Diva sounded the best as far as if you were just doing a blind test. The Diva actually did the OB6 sounds the best, the Oberheim sound. You know, as far as it goes, I would say that V Collection's cool, but it just can't beat out Omnisphere or Complete 13. All right, guys, that's it. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. If I didn't mention your favorite synth, which I get a lot of comments like this, that doesn't mean it's a bad synth. One of my favorite synths of all time is the Korg Prologue, and I don't think it's on the top of like anybody else's like best synth of all time list. I didn't recommend it in this video, but that doesn't mean it's a bad synth. And I think for you, if you have a synth that you really love, that's awesome. I want you to enjoy that synth. But let me know what you guys thought in the comments. Let me know if you think I missed anything or if I was wrong about something, and I'll see you in the next video.